Hello, greetings. Welcome to Connect Africa. Welcome to our daily session where we analyze all what's happening in the continent and what matters to us and what is happening even globally, but that matters to Africa. So today, without further ado, I'll just go to the topic. It's about the US loan or IMF sending a warning to US with regards to its loan that's increasing yearly. To analyze that, here we have our Kwame Gonza. So welcome, Kwame.
Thank you so much, Mahlet, and greetings to everyone. We've been seeing each other today. We had a couple of broadcasts, of course, the whole day, and that is, of course, great because, as we told you, Connect Africa is a formidable platform that is here to stay and is here to inform, us about our continent and our interests, of course, across the globe. So this is very important, and that is the very reason why everyone should, support the platform. And of course, we are appreciative of those who have supported, Connect Africa all this time. But more so, we want you to invite other people. Invite one person, invite two people every day, and stuff like that. So as Malit has mentioned, we want to discuss, the United States debt. It's ballooning. We know that the debt is ballooning. It has gone almost up to, I think, $35 trillion. And, they have said that it's around 120, more than 121, percent of the GDP of the United States, which GDP is around 25, trillion dollars. So you have $35 trillion in debt, and you have a GDP of 25 trillion. So this is up to 121%, of course, which is pathetic. But on the other side, also, on the other side, we have had this narrative that Africa is in debt. All right. So we want to look. Oh, all right. So
Okay.
with Mallet today we are going to look at these areas. Is really Africa in that much debt, and of course it's the United States which has been parroting this thing around the world, together with its European allies. So we want to see what is it exactly. So back to you, Mallet, and of course thank you so much everyone who's on the platform.
Okay. All right, then. Thank you, Kwame. Yeah. So we'll try to look at three things. Yeah. First of all, the most of us we take it for granted that US do not even have a debt or do not owe any institution any money. I'm sure we share this kind of thought, most of us. And the other thing is, as Kwame said, we try to compare Africa and US. So there was an article that was the starting point at thehill.com where it is published, IMF sending a warning to the alarming US debt. And what it says is actually from the IMF quoted, something will have to give. So I don't know what the US has to give, but in general, what they said is looking at their performance, economic performance for this year. IMF said that there's an unsustainable fiscal practices and which will create risks for the global economy. And what does that mean? And also the economic growth. It's in 2024. It was registered as 2.7%, even having a 0.6 increase from the start of the year. All these things, it raises question because we see, for example, in my country, in Ethiopia, we have sometimes two-digit growth, like 11%, or sometimes it is 6 or 7, 8. So how come the US is just only at 2.6 or 2.7%? those are the things that needs, of course, clarification. In general, from what IMF said, the economy, it needs a strong demand factor. What kind of demand? We will see. And then, as Kwame said, it was 31.4. I think in the beginning of this year, and then now last spring, actually this year spring, but now it's about 35 trillion dollars. So that's huge, and something will have to give. That is what the IMF is saying. In any case, Kwame, let's start from what are does, first of all, to make it clear, does the US even owe any money to any of these financial institutions? We thought it's only Africa and the so-called developing countries that are owing money to these institutions. So let's start from there. If it owes, how much, and yeah, and then we compare it later on with Africa.
Yeah, basically, the US does not owe any money to these institutions because it is the biggest contributor. All right, but it has a lot of its debt owed, about 70% of its debt owed to internal institutions, and those institutions for example, the Federal Reserve. All right, you can talk of the Federal Reserve, and which is the central bank. So it owes the debt. That debt, it owes it to itself, okay, which is the Federal Reserve, and it owes institutions. For example, the National Security, the National Security Fund, where people, the old people, keep their money. Of course, and that this is what people like Robert Kiyosaki have been talking about, that that the National Security Fund, the Social Security Fund of the country, there's no money in there, and it's going to cause problems. Problems are going to rise due to this ballooning debt, because the United States has been borrowing money, has been going and putting its hand into the Social Security Fund. Because remember, the Social Security Fund is money that that is taken from the people's fund. For example, if you work, they take a percentage of your money, like for example 10%, and your employer adds about 5%, right? And then they keep it in a fund. It is compulsory for everyone who's working, and the government normally mandates this, even in our countries. So even these rich countries, and of course this came later on after World War II, whereby the workers, after the agitation, you remember Nkrumah wrote a book called Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare, and all these books, he tried to analyze the reasons why the workers in the metropolis, in the colonial countries, were able to get these benefits, like, for example, Social Security Fund, right? It's because the capitalists were facing a lot of pressure internally, right? So due to this internal pressure, these capitalists, they gave in certain benefits, because there was demonstrations even within the imperialistic countries. So then these capitalists, they had to give independence in the externally, which is our countries, because there was agitation. Capitalism was a system which was facing collapse in itself, because colonialism is hinged on the capitalist system. All right, that is why you see that the United States has all this extravagance. Now, this money is kept by the people in that particular fund, and of course is mandated by the government. But the government has been going in to borrow this money and use it for expenditure. Then we have been hearing people talk about the deficit, government deficit, and of course this is over expenditure, right? And so this is the struggle you hear in the United States between the Democrats and the Republicans. The Republicans are always saying that you should cut expenditure. The Democrats are saying you should spend, you have to spend on the people. And then the Democrats are saying, why are you going to get this money? The Republicans are saying, where are you going to get this money to spend? And while the Democrats are saying, while the Democrats are saying that we should spend more, to some extent, they say we should increase taxes on the rich. All right. But all in these processes of saying we should increase taxes on the rich and then even going through the National Security Fund to take money and all these other activities like printing money, all right, or printing money. Of course, whenever you print, you owe the money to the Federal Reserve, because the Federal Reserve, is the one which is lending you this money. All this now, on the other hand, it increases the inflation. All right. So the more you print, you need to print, of course, because if there's no money, people will demonstrate, right? So this is the problem now that is faced by the country. If you don't print and you provide this money, this inflated money, people will demonstrate. And the rich, they themselves, they don't want to put up this money. All right. This is another thing. That is why the Republicans normally appeal to the rich, because they said they will reduce the taxes. All right. On the rich. Now, this is, what is happening in the US. So, majority of the debt is all the internal, like I said, at 70% to the Federal Reserve, which is Federal Reserve is about around 5.4 trillion dollars, right? Is about $5.4 trillion, and the other agencies like the National Security Fund, the Social Security Fund, is owed about $5 trillion, right? About $5 trillion, and then you have other domestic investors like mutual fund, for example, mutual funds, pension funds, insurance companies, all right, which buy, of course, government bonds. Wow, those ones, the government owes them about 7.6 trillion dollars. All right, so this is debt. Now, of course, the local governments also sometimes, if there's governments which have a lot of money, like for example.
But Kwame, forgive my naivety to this financial thing at all. So the government is lending the government. How do we know that they will pay it back? So we are saying, you said before, the federal, when they print the money, they take it from the Federal Reserve and they have. Did I understand it good?
So yes, so it's like all governments, right? The government which have a central bank. The central bank prints the money on behalf of the government. Do you understand? So now the government uses this money. It means that it owes the central bank. Do you get the point? Now the government must raise enough money, must make enough money, whether through taxes or taxing the rich, to be able to pay back these debts to the central bank. Do you get the point? So it uses that money. We now, this is to say that, this is to assume that the two institutions are independent. The government, which is running itself, and then you have the central bank, which is the Federal Reserve. All right. Now you print and you give it to the government. The government must pay back that money, because the central bank itself has a license to print. You get the point? But the only problem that this brings is that whenever you print, you are likely to bring inflation in the country. That is the problem. So there's a dilemma there. That's to know when you are supposed to print and when you are not supposed to print. And now, fortunately for the United States, its currency is a reserve currency internationally. This is what mostly serves it. That is how it exports its inflation to other countries across the world. So now this puts it in a position that it can print, because at least each of the countries across the globe, they have some dollars, right? Even within their countries. So they will print these dollars and they will send them abroad, and they will buy things with this money without them, even doing much work. And of course, they will even force other countries to have the United States dollar as a federal, as a reserve currency, right? That's why it is a big deal. It's a very big deal for the United States to have its currency as a reserve currency, because it helps it even to get, products from outside, to get items, to buy solid goods, hardy goods from the world without, putting in much work, by just printing these dollars and sending them outside and get the goods. You see, so this is how, it is working. Now, that is why you see that the United States, whenever a country rises up and is trying to to discredit the United States dollar or fight against the United States dollar, so that the United States dollar is no more supreme on the international stage, the United States brings out even its military. And we saw this when it came to Muammar Gaddafi, President Gaddafi of Libya, because he was trying to destabilize that order, that so-called financial order, right? With the, putting up a new currency on the African continent, which is backed by gold. What it means is that all these monies, which is across the globe in form of dollars, is going to now come back to the United States. And whenever you have huge circulation of money in the country, it puts the inflation, it puts a lot of pressure on the goods which are available, because people have a lot of money, right? So when people have a lot of money, remember, it is the money which has come back because people have rejected it. Because remember that if like you do like what Muammar Gaddafi was doing, you are going to block off the dollar. The United States will not anymore present its printed dollar. It has to present gold. So if it has to present gold, then it's going to have to find where to get that gold to present it. It's not going to present its dollar. Now you are blocking it. You are blocking, and now they see you as an enemy. They will bring all types of military, hardware to remove you if you are talking like that. So this is what has kept it, in, at the top of the world. And of course, with this coercive. So why do you think, let me ask a question. Why do you think, of course, it's a rhetorical question. Why do you think that the United States is always forcing itself on countries? Like, for example, it will go to Kenya when Ruto was talking about these things of, Africans. Why do we have to purchase with the dollar? Why don't we use the Pan-African payment and settlement system? Then they started frequenting, United States diplomats started frequenting the State House in Kenya. They were going there in and out, almost every week they were frequenting Kenya. So this is what they are trying to do. This is what they are trying to, to fight against. All right. So that is the work of the central government. That's that's the work of the central bank, or the so-called Federal Reserve. So the major owners of that particular debt internally is the Federal Reserve, and then the other United States agencies, like, for example, the Social Security Fund, which the National Security Fund, which is owed about 5 trillion, and then Federal Reserve is owed about 4.5 trillion. And then you have other private investors like mutual fund and pension funds and insurance companies who are owed about 7.6 trillion. Those are the ones who are, who have the highest, they are the highest holders, the biggest holders. And of course, individuals also at around $700 billion. And then you have the foreign part. All right. So the foreign debt is close to around 80 billion, 80 trillion, right? It's close to around 80 trillion. And the holders of that, debt, they are Japan right now is the one leading with 1.1 trillion. China with around $850 billion. And then you have the United Kingdom itself also is part of the holders. You have Luxembourg at number 4 with around 335 billion. Belgium. So all these, they buy the United States debt simply because of course, what we have talked about again, the reserve, and the fact that the United States dollar is the reserve currency across the globe, and also the fact that the United States is likely to stay around for some time as a country due to its strength militarily. That is the leader of the so-called world, right? Is the so-called leader of the world. So this creates some level of trust that even some people in our poor countries, the reason why people take money from these poor countries, our countries here, and they go and invest it in the United States and invest it in Europe, is because they know that there is a level of stability over there. That if they think that our countries are unstable, they don't want to invest their money there. So they will take it to these countries which are rich, because they expect some level of stability, or it is unlikely that there will be war and stuff like that. So someone will steal money from these our countries and go over there and buy a lot of real estate, buy a lot of property, right? Because he wants to, to keep their money safe in that. So that is how also these countries see it. So that China has been able to take part of that debt. Japan also has been able to take part of that debt of the United States, to lend the United States money. And then Luxembourg, United Kingdom, and all these countries who hold the United States, debt, including, of course, Belgium. So I mentioned Japan is at number one with around 1.1 trillion. China is around 867 billion. The United Kingdom is around 688 billion. Luxembourg is holding around $335 billion. And Belgium is holding around $322 billion. So which is approximately $8 trillion and is about 30% of the whole United States debt. So that is what is happening. So altogether, that is where we are coming to that figure of $35 trillion. If you put what is internally and you put, also together with what is owed externally, and that's what pushes the figure to 35 trillion and is 121% of the GDP. So is more indebted than any African country, and even all the African continent combined.
Wow, that's an eye-opening, I think, for many people who don't know. But maybe before, when the chats gets longer, than not longer in a sense when we have many chats, uh, I might not find it again. So just maybe quickly, if it adds anything to this first talking points that you have just said. Um, on top of that, I think he meant CND said, then there is a household debt, in bracket mortgage, home equity, revolving debt, auto loans, credit card, student loans, and other consumer lending such as retail cards of $17.3 trillion. Uh, and then Child of God adds, that's why they are cracking down on BTC. I don't know what BTC is. They don't want people
Bitcoin.
skipping the
Bitcoin.
debt. Okay. The debt inflation plantation. Yeah.
Yeah, so what the government wants in the United States is that you have to keep using the dollar, because that's the only currency it has to pay back. All right, it doesn't have like enough gold like to pay back this debt. So you have to keep using what the Federal Reserve is pumping out, is printing. All right, what they are printing. You have to keep using that, because if you stop using it and you stop accepting it as a means of repayment of your debt, then you're gonna bring problems, and even people might riot. The economy will collapse in the United States, and people will riot. Okay, people will riot within the country because the money is not there. Like for example, just imagine the national, like the Social Security Fund. All right. The biggest contributors to the Social Security Fund in the United States, they are the so-called baby boomers. Those people who were active after the World War II, right? After World War II, 1945. Those are the biggest contributors, because those are the people they normally say they're the ones who built the United States and its prosperity. Now, imagine that there's no money to pay these people when they want their money. Like, this is going to cause problems for the government. It's going to cause chaos. It's going to cause riots within the country itself. And so these are the things that the International Monetary Fund, of course, is warning the United States about. And of course, what we are used to for, what we are used to as a people, we are used to to the United States warning our poor countries. All right, and of course, we want the African people to understand these things very, 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 very well, because sometimes these things are presented as sophisticated, but they are not really sophisticated if you understand them. All right, if you pay attention to them, at least you try to understand them. They are really not sophisticated. Okay, so the United States has used the IMF, and the IMF, we are only used to the IMF, pushing us, our countries, in debt. All right, and the IMF itself being used to export, to export the United States inflation. All right, when the United States prints, for example, prints a lot of money, like during COVID period, they printed more than, I think, more than $3 trillion, right? To give out these checks. The African countries did not print. And this is what Dangote was speaking about actually recently. And he said that, why are you people putting up the interest rate? Why is Nigeria hiking up the interest rate and devaluing the naira, right? Why are you doing this? Because in Africa, it's not that we printed money during COVID. We did not print any money during COVID. These rich countries, they are the ones who printed a lot of money. So that's where the interest rates should be hiked. But now what happened is this. The United States printed all this cash, this money, and they took this money and gave it to some to their public. But what happened? The money which you saw, because remember that the United States contributes about 17%. Right? It has the biggest voting powers on the International Monetary Fund. Now, what happened is that they printed a lot of money and they gave some of that money to the African countries. You remember they were talking about the poverty relief fund. And most of that money was misused when it came to the African countries. Of
Yeah.
course, countries like South Africa got about $4.5 billion, Ghana about 1 billion, I think Kenya, others, Uganda, they got about 750 million. That money was never accounted for. Okay, so this is how they export the debt. They finish the printing and then they force it out and they send it to our African countries, right? So that is what happens. And they send it in form of debt. And we have even to pay interest on that money. And what they have been doing is what this guy has been this guy John Perkins called the what he called the Confessions of an Economic Hitman, which he paid he wrote a book on it, right? Because he used to work at the World Bank and used to work with some of these corporations like Beyecha, which is a construction company, right, in the United States. Now, what he said is that uh, when these IMFs and World Banks they have given the debt like this, now what the United States comes after printing all this money and giving it out as debt to us, then they come and they identify the resources which they want. All right. And then they use tactics and they take the resources. This is what I say, that they export their inflation, but even other than that, they get value from exporting that inflation. They take the resources like oil and what, and they push your hand. So they put you almost in perpetual slavery. Like the perpetual slavery, like for example, what they are trying, I'll pick out, like for example, Ghana. The slavery which they are trying to choke Ghana into. All right. In that it has entered into this date. Even today, you still hear that the World Bank is still adding more loans. So on one hand, you could say that they are even encouraging corruption. All right. They are the ones who are encouraging corruption on the African continent. If you look at if you look at the loan which was given, for example, to Ghana, $1 billion COVID relief fund. All right, that money was not accounted for. People asking for accountability from the government. The government did not give accountability for that money. Probably the president used it for for campaigns. All right, because he gave out a lot of money in the country when that money came in. All right, now when that money was not accounted for, they came in again to sign to give the $3 billion. Okay, there's no accountability. There's no accountability, complete no accountability. Now, after that, then we are hearing these days that the World Bank is again giving out some small loans, which we are hearing 250 million, 500 million. These are coming, in discreetly. They are coming almost under the table when there's no much noise that has been made. For example, the 250 million, which was rejected by the parliament recently by Ghana, right? So that one has not been made like huge public whereby noise has been made. That is money which is being pumped in there by the World Bank. Now, after that, what they will do is that they will see that you are so indebted like this, then they will increase the pressure on your resources. And they increase the pressure on all the other assets which you have as a country and infrastructure. And they say you must privatize them. Like for example, right now the Ghana Electricity Distribution Company, Ghana's company, I think is called ECG, Ghana Electrical. something electrical company of Ghana or something like that, ECG, right? They are forcing so much, because even when Akufo-Addo came, they were trying to force the government to privatize this company, and the World Bank was the one leading this process. All right, and of course, if they have put people who are easily swayed and they have programmed these people they studied from their institutions, of course, it makes it even easier. So now this is what happens: that the pressure increases and the control, the grip over your resources now continues like that. Now, who benefits from this process? Of course, is the United States. And that is why Nkrumah elaborated very well how they use these institutions. All right. He spoke about the IMF and spoke about the World Bank. But what we are seeing, what we are seeing is like the United States as a country which led the building of this institution, these institutions, we are seeing that they may somehow, this institution, turn around, and it's like you raising a small monster and saying that, these white people normally they raise pets. Like some of them, they can raise a lion, raise a leopard. Someone can raise it small and it will be growing. So when it grows to a certain level, you think that you have domesticated it. Therefore, it is not it is not a lion anymore. Then the lion turns around and eats you one day, right? Like one day it turns around and eats you. So for me, this is how it is looking, that an institution which the United States has dominated for a very long time, and it has dominated for a long time and domesticated, is now turning around to warn the United States that your debt is too much, is excess, is in excess. So that's how I'm looking at it from a certain point, that this monster called the International Monetary Fund somehow is turning around, to try to eat, or even to advise the mother who raised it. It's like the child who's turning around to try to advise the mother who raised him, all right, or her, that this is how we should go about this situation. So that's what I can only say about this relationship that we are seeing between the International Monetary Fund currently, of course, with the United States, and the fact that it's turning around to warn it as a country about its excessive debt, and that it should do something about it. Of course, saying that it should do something about it, and whether there's something which the United States can do about it, that's a question for for another day, I think.
Yeah, thank you really for that. An unintended question has been answered, which is we all also take for granted that U.S. World Bank and IMF are the same. So what is IMF saying to the U.S.? So yeah, that, that says a lot. Thank you all for a lot of engagements from Child of God. It seems like Child of God has a lot to say. Perhaps if there's time, maybe you will share. We might invite you here. And then, yeah, you share your view. Other than that, yeah, CNDS and also Lion. Dejuma Boutique said, how World Bank is just few blocks away from the White House. And the lion, it's a long name, Lion Rules the Jungle. He said, like, good to see you both. It just made me smile, but like it warms our heart. I apologize about being late here. No problem. We can always catch up. But yeah, this is like a class for all of us, not just one way from here to you, but we also learn a lot from you from the other side. Now let's go to the next one. The next question that I want you to dwell in, which is the debt. You said it briefly, what US owes and the African, what African countries owes. You said this $35 trillion is nothing. Even combined all the 55 countries, there are some countries who don't owe anything. 3 African countries, I think. It's beyond that.
Eritrea.
Yeah. Eritrea, Botswana. What was the other one? I don't know.
I think recently it was Libya, but I don't know Libya right now.
Libya, exactly.
Ever since the colonialists took over, I've
No,
not checked
it's
it.
Libya. A recent article says that. Now, yeah, if you can compare that debt and what does it mean, and how do they in terms of also like when they push out that printed money as a debt to add value on it, how Africa is spending it, and then also how they are getting profit out of it. If you can say something, yeah, about that.
So, these
Be-
people,
be- uh-huh, uh-huh. Before
have
you
the,
start, I have a correction. I think the way I said it, saying this has said the 17.3 million, all that loan from inside the auto car, the mortgage and everything, student loan, is to be added on the 35. So it's around 53 or something. Yeah. Okay.
okay. These people, they really have a lot of money, right? And you could think of it as like being, I think, selfish or greedy or something like that, in that you have this ability to make the world a better place, right? You have this technology to make the world a better place, and then reach somewhere and stabilize and say at least every citizen of the world should have a better, life. Okay, but they don't do it. All right. In When Nkrumah became the president, he became the prime minister, first of all, the leader of government. I think it was in 1954 or something, or in 1954. Uh, he traveled to the United States, and Nkrumah hoped that the the United States would work with Africa to transfer some of the technology and help to rebuild Africa. All right, because the state in which Africa was, even of course, almost the same state as today, it needed rebuilding. It needed rebuilding, and the United States had all these technologies. Of course, if you wanted to build the dams and stuff like that, roads and railway systems and all this, but and the United States had a lot of money. Remember that after World War II, United States emerged as the most powerful country because it did not fight. It basically did not fight in the war because it came in at the end when the war had been already won by Russia. Russia is almost the one who defeated Hitler during this war. So it emerged with a lot of wealth. It had a lot of money because it was the one who was lending money to the Europeans to carry out whatever they were doing, they're fighting and stuff like that. So Nkrumah hoped that the US would lend maybe some help technologically, and also some money. But these people, like they never wanted this. There is this looking down, there's this looking down on Africans, even that is hard to understand. I think that they are still driven by that racist, thinking that the Africans don't deserve anything. Okay, so that is what we see, that there is that deliberate, and of course also the colonialist mentality, I think, it still drives them. Okay, the fact that this place, as we had, I think Joseph Borro, who is a European diplomat, or foreign affairs European and stuff like that, who said that Africa is a I think Africa is a farm and Europe is a garden or something like that. Who said that it's a farm anywhere where they can go. So there is that racist mentality still drives them. And of course, not only the Europeans, but of course, all the United States and this ruling class. So they still think that this place is not supposed to be developed. Okay? It's not supposed to be developed. So that is why then these loans are supposed to be used for the exploitation of these places, not to improve them. Do not improve them. If anything that is supposed to improve them, do not do it. All right? Don't do it. Just talk about it. And talk about these vague terms, but don't do anything. Don't build the railways. I will give you an example. The best example for I think is the railway, right? If we had a railway across the African continent with an investment of just $150 billion, on the African continent, in one railway platform which connects to the whole African continent and all the African countries, it would unlock a value of more than 100, and it will add to Africa's economy in tourism and goods which are going to move across the continent. It will add more than $1 trillion, right? More than 1 trillion. The value could go even up to $2 trillion. Mind you, the African economy currently is at around $3.5 trillion. So mind you, an investment of just 10% would unlock 100%. So with an investment of just $150 billion or $1 billion, you would unlock more than $1 trillion, because the goods will start moving across the continent, industrialization. But they don't like this. We have seen what happened, what is happening with the Dangote refinery, the sabotage that is going on. We have seen what is happening in the East African region, that when the East African region want to build a pipeline from Uganda, from Western Uganda, all the way to to Tanga through Tanzania, they try to fight it and say it is not viable, that it's going to destroy the environment. Mind you, the United States is building a pipeline in Louisiana, is building a pipeline. Okay, so but they think that they're supposed to build these infrastructures and improve their society, but for us, we cannot. When Dangote builds a refinery, it should be sabotaged. Okay, Standard Chartered Bank this is the institution that Dangote was talking about that was sabotaging him during the COVID, because they lent him some money. Standard Chartered Bank lent Dangote some money, right? And they wanted to make sure that the refinery fails by asking Dangote to pay the money. He should pay the money even when there was no work. You see, during the COVID period, and there was no economic activity during that period. Now, the money, it is normally used for further extraction, more extraction, without adding value, without adding any value on the African continent. That is why in their documents, when you go to the documents, for example, which were signed, or the so-called pledges, which were reached at the US-Africa Summit, for example, in 2020, December, when the US, the African heads of state met, of course, which will come here even and analyze how far are those pledges. I think we need to come here and analyze that and see these pledges, how far are they? The $55 billion which was pledged by the United States at the US-Africa Summit in 2022, where has it gone? How far has it gone? How much has been invested? So when you go and look at those documents, what they pledged to, you don't see any tangible item that was pledged money to, that we are going to build a road here, right? We are going to build a 1,000-kilometer road. We are going to build a railway, okay? We are going to build maybe a solar factory. We are going to build a lithium factory, a lithium refining factory, or copper refining factory, so that the United States can take from the African country. We don't see any of that. So there is vague items. Normally, these loans are wrapped around the vague items, and this is the reason why, Ghana recently rejected the loan. All right, rejected the loan from the IMF. The Ghana Parliament rejected the loan from the World Bank, because the loan was, the $250 million loan was wrapped around vague definitions of what it is going to do. You don't see it. They say it's going to be used for improving the supervision of ICT infrastructure, for example. So somebody will use a lot of big words, but you will not see exactly what he's saying. Like, we are going to use the loan for the improvement of the supervision of ICT infrastructure. We're going to improve the supervision of the ICT infrastructure, things like that. We are
So
going to improve.
when they provide that loan, or maybe force that loan on African countries, the government do not have any say on that, how to spend it.
So remember, when you look at the rejections, the government, of course, has a say, right? But remember, since 1966, the first sphere on the African continent that was conquered was the political space. All right. Remember that they have the ability of always putting their men in the president's house in these African countries. That is number one. And the president has the control of the parliament in most cases, right? And in Ghana, it was able to do this particular loan, was able to succeed, because remember, in Ghana, parliament is almost 50-50, opposition and ruling party. So the minority is a minority by only one candidate in the Ghana parliament currently. the government has only one candidate above the opposition. So in this particular case, the minority actually was able to have a bigger voice.
Oh.
And it could be for reasons, sometimes the members of parliaments are not there, but even some of the ruling, parliament, the ruling members of parliament, they joined in. All right. So now it goes all the way from the political level, from the highest level of the country, then it goes to the parliament, and then some of these loans actually they pass through. Some of the loans they pass through, the ministries. Remember that the World Bank normally has offices in each of the countries. You remember that. And even International Monetary Fund also, sometimes it has offices within each of these countries, but at least the World Bank, it has office, country office. They always have country office. So they are always working with the ministries. So now you have these ministries, they will take, because the ministries, remember, they belong to the ruling government, is the one who appoints these ministries. They will take these loans to the ministries, and the ministries will take the loan to the parliament. And when you have majority in parliament, then they're going to pass the loans. Now, what happens is that majority of the consultation service, the so-called consultation services, the money goes for consultation to paying the Western consultants. They are the experts, for example, on IT or experts on human rights and stuff like that. All right. So this is what happens. So at the end of the day, the money doesn't benefit the society at all, especially the Western loans. And this is why the Chinese loans, even though China holds just 13% of Africa's debt, all external debt. Africa's external debt is around 800 billion dollars, right? Is around
Mhm.
800 billion dollars. 77% of Africa's debt is owned by Western institutions. So this is now contrary. This is another trap. This is again contrary to what the West has been saying, because you have had politicians.
How much is owed to China? Because this is what they push, that
Yes.
China is
So what is
creating.
owed to China is just 13% of that debt. Africa's debt out of the
One,
of the
one
of the
three. Let it be clear,
yes,
yeah.
1 3. All right, 1 3. So now this is contrary. This is very contrary to what the Western diplomats and Western people all over in all the Western institutions have been running around the world saying that China is burdening Africa with debt. And if you look at Africa's debt, actually, generally, it is around, altogether, is around 1.4, 1.5 trillion dollars. Okay, because we have around 800, all right, and we have around 700, when it comes to 700 billion dollars when it comes to domestic debt. Then external debt, we have around 800 billion dollars. So approximately we have around 1.4 to 1.5. So when you look at it all together with our economy, which is around 3.4 to 3.5 trillion dollars, Africa's debt in all is just below 60%. Below 60%, some were 50, around there. Now compare that to the United States, which is 121%. And they themselves, the United States, they owe China 800, $800 billion, right? $860 billion. Okay. So you see the difference. You see that there's a huge, tremendously, huge difference when it comes to Africa's debt compared, to the United States. That our debt to GDP is very low, all right. And even when we compare to how much we owe, we owe China as a continent, is very low compared to the United States itself. So this is basically the difference. So now what you see is that all this debt, which is 77%, that the United States as that Africa owes the Western institutions, all of them, of course, bilateral, what is called bilateral and multilateral institutions, all this debt, when you go around the continent, you don't see how much it has helped, Africa to improve. Majority of Africa's progress that has happened since 2020, for the last, where we have had, remember that we have had, some of the fastest growing economies on the international stage. Even when you look at the past 2 3 years, 10 of the fastest growing economies on in the world, 7 of them have been African countries for the last 5 years, right? Now, all this growth has happened because because of Africa's association with China, and majorly that 3% debt. I mean, that 13% debt that we owe China, that we have been borrowing, because China had emerged as a major, since 2020, had emerged as the major lender on the African continent. Now, the term major lender, it does not mean that China is the one who owes the most, who holds Africa's debt the most. That's not what it means. But they have been using this to twist it, that China is a major lender to the African continent. China emerged as a major lender to the African continent because the loans from the West were not benefiting the African continent. All right? These loans were used to exploit further the African continent, were used as a trap. Now, what happened is that China came with an alternative, not the best, but it came with a better alternative for the African continent. Therefore, the African heads of state, all of them, they were swinging and going to China. Okay, so this is what happened. Now, those loans produced a lot of infrastructure across the African continent, roads, railways, and of course, you can even witness the Djibouti, Ethiopia railway. You can look at the Madaraka, the Mombasa, Nairobi railway, which is they are even planning to extend all the way to Kampala, right? So this is the product, and of course the roads, the many roads which we have produced. In Chinese loans, there was tangible results that we saw, and these results, they led to the rapid progress. This infrastructure, they helped the continent to grow forward. And of course, in addition to the fact that we sold a lot, that China during this period is when China was growing very fast, that we sold a lot of commodities, because Africa's economy is basically exporting of raw materials, because we are the lower base. We are at the lower base of the economy. So we exported a lot. So now our association with China, in less than, for just a period of less than 30 years, our association with China has been more productive than our association with the United States and all European countries combined for 600 years. So this is what happened now that we are seeing. And our trade with China grew to a level of more than $300 billion. All right? In this short period of less than 30 years. Right? And if you look at the United States and European countries combined, our trade with them is less than 200 billion. Less than 200 billion for 600 years. So basically, our trade with them should be around, should be around 9 trillion. Our trade with the United States and Europe combined all together for the period they have been here. If they were trading with us on the same terms, which they call unfavorable, as China, because they normally say that China is here exploiting resources, what is exploiting. But if we were trading on the same terms with the West as we are trading with China, our trade with the United States and all of them, European countries combined, should be around 9 trillion, going forward. But instead, what we have is that, we have a trade of less than $200 billion with all these countries combined, the United States and the European countries. And therefore, our relationship has been continuously an exploitative one, our relationship with the United States, and a relationship of undermining African economies, as we are seeing the Dangote refinery and how the West is attacking, taking out, while Shell and ExxonMobil and Chevron, all these, and Total, they are taking out the crude. They don't want Dangote to refine this crude, and they are fighting against him. All right, because of this infrastructure. So that is the relationship of minimizing, of undermining, of patronizing us, of looking down on us, and humiliating, in some cases, humiliating, the Africans, and looking at them like they are nothing. They don't deserve to have industrialization. So fight against, and the fight against the emergence of African private sector, that has been pivotal, even though they talk about it, in open, but in the secret, they fight against the emergence of African private sector, because they see the emergence of a solid private sector as a competition to their private sector. Of course, it's the competition for the market and the raw materials, and therefore that is what we are seeing. So the African continent definitely has to move away from operating in this regard, but it means we have to completely disconnect ourselves from this system.
My brother, thank you. Thank you, really, Kwame, for spitting that fire. Hopefully, people will listen. I mean, with this video will get shared, and there's a lot of things that we can learn. But in the meantime, I have been sharing the comments. It's really a lot. Sendes, Child of God, Everton Jackson, Mamale, Imhotep Heru, Mohammed Musa. Who else we have? Yeah, thank you all. Lion rules the jungle. Thank you all for your engagement. So next, what we are going to look at is, if we talked about so far about how much Africa owes to IMF versus what the US owes, the so-called. Now let's talk about how this money is paid back to to IMF. And yeah, there's really an interesting thing, how again imperialism or neocolonialism is continuing. This is one aspect. As Kwame always reminds us in the book, in one chapter of Kwame Nkrumah's book, there are these things in how in various ways imperialism appears. So yeah, Kwame, without further ado, so how is it repaid back? Now we know how much we owe, US versus Africa, but when we pay back, is there a fair stage, a fair place for us?
So basically, for us, when we pay back, the United States is unlikely that it will pay back the debt which it owes, but I think it will continue to go around the circle to print more, right? Print more, and also to keep this going, it must stay at the top of the world militarily and continue to put down other countries, right? Like for example, you go to Libya, you bomb the place, you destroy the economy, you harvest that economy. All right, this is like harvesting, like what they say that this is a garden, this is a farm, that they just come in and destroy things and harvest the country, harvest the gold, which of course I think they said that Gaddafi had about 150 tons of gold, right? 150 tons of gold. We don't know where that gold went, but some people say the United States took the gold, right? So this is what happens, and they continue the process, of course, enslaving these poor countries and depending on them, depending on their labor. Of course, is an immigrant country and stuff like that. And then, of course, uh, uh, you know, uh, and then you see that when he's facing these huge problems, because it's not going to pay back this money, because the money that is being raised is in itself not enough to pay back the loan, right? Because they are overspending. Okay, that is what is happening. It is not possible to pay back this money because most of it you are just printing and printing and printing, right? So and at the end of the day, you know, what you have to do is just to postpone the process until things exacerbate, until things explode by themselves and things become uncontrollable to you. That what is being shown, what is being shown to you is that you are living beyond your means. So, but when we say that it's paying, the only countries which are paying back the debt is our African countries and all these global South countries. They're the ones which are struggling and then paying the debt, and then our people living in penury. And that is what we are, what we are seeing. So when things get worse, that is where you are seeing that the United States is becoming aggressive, that it tries to distract the people at home by engaging in wars across the world. You have seen that Ukraine has now entered into Russia, has started attacking Russia from inside, right? And the United States has given the F-16 fighters to Ukraine. So it wants to participate in these wars, and then of course antagonizing China in the South China Sea, so that people at home may be distracted and say that, oh, our country is fighting some sort of crusade There's a war, a holy war that is going on across the world, so that people can put off, can forget these economic hardships that are going to come home, and then of course inflation, the fact that things are going rapidly up. All right. So, but in paying the debt, there's no really paying back this debt that the United States is going to pay back, because you can't pay back, 121% of your debt. It can't happen. There's no way, it can't happen. All right. It can't happen. So I think the best solution is to calm down and live within the acceptable means, within your means, which they cannot accept in itself. All right, going forward. And now the world has become smart, that people now have started fighting back. Even these poor countries, they want to build their own private sector and stuff like that. So you have these monopolies in the United States, of course, fighting hard. Monopolies like, for example, BlackRock with these hedge funds and fund management. They try to take over the infrastructure of the world. Of course, they are from the United States, and be able to exploit from these. But even these tactics in themselves are not enough. So if the United States is going to continue living in this kind of way, then it will have probably to go and harvest China. It has to harvest China's economy and take the wealth from China, which is not going to be possible that China is going to accept it. I don't think China is going to accept this. And so what they are trying to do, to harvest China and open up Russia, probably divide Russia and, exploit Russia's resources. Okay? Exploit Russia's resources and then keep this thing going. So that is the fight that you are seeing that is happening right now, that they are struggling very much to see that they open up Russia, probably divide it and break it into pieces and exploit Russia's resources. And of course, this is what the wars, the wars in antiquity, all these wars by the so-called Alexander the Great, Napoleon, and all these guys. These were wars about resources that they used to come from their countries when things were saturated within their countries, economies were saturated. Then they would go to the next countries and take over and take the resources from there. And that's the reason, of course, they came to Africa. And so this is what you are seeing even right now, that they want to harvest Russia and they harvest China, and then of course inject that wealth into their countries, so that these countries, people can continue to be poor over there, while the few in Europe and the United States can continue to be rich. So, and the world right now is going to face in a very difficult time. The time we are going into is a very difficult one, extremely difficult one, because now you see that the global South countries are trying to take part. They are trying to take power, more power. Because remember, we said in some of our previous analysis, I think Mahlet will come here and look at colonialism extensively. Colonialism versus the global South. We'll come and look at some topic like that. We will see how the global South has been taking power since since 1804, right, when Haiti got its independence. So the global South has been taking power from that period, and every time there has been some level of chaos within the West, the global South has taken some amount of power. Even right now, what we are seeing is that the global South is trying to take more power ever since colonialism, slavery. Of course, we had slavery. Slavery was stopped. We gained some level of independence there. And then, of course, political independence in 1945 and all that period up to 1994 with South Africa. And we gained another level of independence there. So this was power that was gained by the global South and all the global South countries. So even what is happening now is is to some level kind of like that people are taking back more power from the imperialistic countries which have been controlling this world. And of course, all this has to do with the consciousness of the people that they are fighting back, and their consciousness has improved. They cannot be lied to, as we have seen that people now push back on the Western lies, which have been used in the past. All right. So now people push back. So it's going to be very difficult right now. We are entering a phase which is going to be very difficult, because these countries do not want to relinquish that control and that exploitation of the global South. And that is simply because they don't have any plan of paying back those debts.
I also would like to point out like the interest rate that is set.
On the interest rates, the United States in itself does not borrow actually from the IMF, because it prints and puts there the money. It doesn't really borrow from there. So it treats it as a business. So who borrows there is the global south countries and a few other countries, maybe its friends, the friends of the United States, the European countries. So those ones, if they want money, for Africa, of course, as Dr. Arikana, mentioned it, I think a time ago, Africa borrows when we borrow, because remember we mentioned already that the IMF in itself as an institution was instituted to continue the process of exploitation. And that is why even Nkrumah, talks about it in his book, in Neocolonialism, the last stage of imperialism. Those are institutions to continue that process so that they can earn these huge interests on these particular loans that are given. But even in the loans themselves, we have seen that they don't come here. Those loans don't come here. They stay over there, right? And they send consultants and whether it's building dams in the past, when they sent people to build the dams from the West, if you talk about, like, for example, the Akosombo, the money stayed there and the companies came from there. So the things which they are accusing the Chinese right now, they did those same things. Now, what happens is that Africa borrows at rates which are around 7 to 9%. And now the European countries, or for example, Greece and all these other countries, or Italy, or others which may want loans, they borrow at less than, 3%, even sometimes 1%, of course, which is completely unfair. And of course, this is simply because these are friends of the United States. So that is what it is when it comes to interest rates.
Is there any policy change, or I don't know, in their discussion uh, between Democrats and the Republicans with regards to the relation with IMF, or what they are doing using IMF as a tool and oppressing other countries, so-called developing countries?
Foreign policy front, I think on the foreign policy front, uh, they are not really that different. The Democrats and the Republicans are not different when it comes on to the foreign policy front. All right, and it is just until right now uh, that Donald Trump wants a little bit to differ from them, and even wants to differ almost from slightly from the Republicans, that he's trying to scale back the excessive spending on outside activities, that the expenditure should be done on inside. And of course the Democrats are fighting against that. But generally, on the foreign policy front, there's no really difference between the Democrats and the Republicans in the United States, regarding to what happens, whether it's dealing with the IMF and of course the militarization of the world and other places of the global south.
Thank you, Kwame. As always, we take longer than what we aim. But please, as you're watching here, share the video with others. Give it a like, and I'm sure you all are. For me, I think you all have subscribed. So, but share it with others so that they can subscribe and follow as well. So, I'm trying to locate if there's any question or comments. Uh, but at one, was it Child of God here in the chat section was saying they know that this is happening since 2000. They call it the Great Reset, and they have been preparing for this like it's not really nothing new for them, something like that, for the US.
Yeah, so I think they are always preparing for certain things, but of course there's always things which come as they are unexpected for them. Like, for example, if you look at German went and it wanted to go, or even Napoleon. If we start with Napoleon, wanted to go and attack Russia. He expected that if he goes and attack Russia, take over Russia, he'll get those resources and be able to develop Europe. So that's what Napoleon expected, and things didn't turn out as he wanted. It turned out this to be his destruction, the attacking of Russia. And also we saw Hitler himself also. He wanted to attack Russia. He thought that this is a good idea, and of course it was the matter of resources also. So all these were unexpected. He was planning a different thing of building a more powerful empire, probably Europe. But things did not turn out as he wanted. And so this is what we are seeing also the United States has been pushing eastwards, pushing eastwards. But even when we go back to the Revolutionary War in San Domingo in Haiti, that the French actually, when the slaves came up to revolt, they had thought that this slavery business is going to go on for forever, right? And we see that when they started fighting, Napoleon sent troops, to San Domingo, which is Haiti. He thought that okay, this one can easily be put down, and it was not the case. These guys they defeated Napoleon, and mind you, they did not have any resources. They were not business people. They were not free people. They were just slaves, but they managed to beat him. So they always have these plans, but sometimes these plans don't play out. When a certain level of consciousness has risen within the oppressed people, so it doesn't play out. Even colonialism, happened like that. That they did not expect it. They even tried to resist. They tried to resist colonialism. For example, people had to fight. For example, in Zimbabwe, these Ian Smith and stuff like that. The British had even lodged in Kenya. They had taken over, for example, the Kenyan, the highlands in Kenya. You see, so now when they are defeated, they had to pack their things and go. So the same thing which you see happening in Australia, that the British came and took over this land and killed the people. That's what they were doing. They were trying to do, for example, in Kenya, that the British had come and lodged on some of the most fertile places. But when they defeated them, when the Mau Mau defeated them, they had to pack their things and leave and go back to Britain. But they wanted to make it like what they used, what they did in Australia. Actually, all the Europeans, they wanted to take over the African continent. But this project, which of course they achieved in places like Canada, because they took over the indigenous people and killed all of them, and they killed the indigenous people in North America, which is the United States today, and all the other countries, Argentina, killed the indigenous people in Australia, New Zealand, and took over this place. This is the same project that they wanted to, of course, to do in the African continent, but of course they failed. So it's not that everything these guys plan that it succeeds. It doesn't succeed always as they plan it to. So they may have planned for all these, of course, bringing COVID and stuff like that, but it doesn't really play out as they plan it, because all the other people who are oppressed are always also fighting back. And we are fighting back. Of course, I will not say the other people. We are always all fighting back, and of course, even what we are doing here is to try to raise the consciousness of our people, so that our people know what is going on. That what is really going on is fraud. These you can only call them fraud houses. The IMF, World Bank, and all these institutions, they are just fraud houses, which are just manipulating and spreading corruption, across the planet, across the earth. There's nothing valuable that they are adding, to the world. And of course, they are working together with the United States military, the intelligence organizations. They are the same, working with all the imperialist intelligence organizations to enforce this system of servitude, of perpetual servitude. So, but of course, we are fighting against it, and it cannot continue to last like that if we continue to fight against it.
Okay, it was Royce. Thank you, Kwame. Royce Dog, who said the US is broke and the West is broke also. The IMF is actually part of the Pentagon in Washington. Yeah, thank you so much, Kwame, again for another great analysis and discussion. Thank you. All Trump's domestic policies are enriching what people in his socioeconomic class. The two parties, that's Democrats and Republicans, only differ on who and how to attack first when it comes to foreign policy. But attacking, they will Nonetheless, that is our own seeing this. They are they are all ruled by the same houses, the House of Edinburgh and Gluckberg. Yeah. All right then, Komi. Anything else?
I just want to thank everyone who paid attention to the program. It's very important, and please support Connect Africa. In the PayPal and the super chat. But we want to thank you, everyone who supported us. The Juma, bandits here and this, everyone, child of God, everyone who's been part of this, program and who is always supporting, of course, Connect Africa. We really, really appreciate. But more so, please share the program with other people and invite other people to the platform. If you are new to the platform, please subscribe to the channel. And we have about, I think, 29. We had about 40, likes. Please like the video so that the algorithm can be able to suggest it to other people. I would like the algorithm to be in favor, of us, but you alone can push it to that point. So please do that and support the platform so that we can grow and grow together, into the revolution. Please, we are not here to play. We are here, for serious business because we understand that the time we are living in is different, and therefore we might different. So this generation has to do something because we have a lot of tools. We have been given tools, more tools than our ancestors were given, and yet they succeeded. So this generation too must succeed at this mission. And like Franz Fanon said, which I always say, that every generation must find its mission and either fulfill it or betray it. We must either fulfill it or betray it. So I believe that things have to change this generation, and our mission is for the unification, majorly of the African continent. So I want to thank you very much, everyone. Yeah. So those are my few words. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hello. We see you. Great out, San. At the end, she came to say hello. But most of you, you are here at the background. Thank you all. Have a good evening. Have a good day. Have a good morning. So, depending where you are. So, we will see you again on the next one. It's a ciao ciao from us. Bye. Stay blessed.